Hi, welcome to Quiet Connection, a podcast dedicated to ending the stigma around postpartum mental health. I'm Chelsea. Today we'll be hearing part 2 of Victoria's traumatic birth story. I want to remind listeners that this episode contains graphic content and to be mindful of your comfort levels. Let's get back to Victoria.
So I was able to rest for a few more hours, and all the while the nurses are tending to me, and as they're tending to me and changing out the bed pads,
Yeah.
they're commenting on the blood loss, oh, you're losing a lot of blood, but they always made it seem like it was a good thing. Oh, a lot of bloody show, so much blood. Every single one of you said that. I feel like maybe that's not a good thing, but okay. It's like one of those things where you watch the flight attendant during turbulence. It's like,
Right, yeah.
are you sure we're okay?
Are you freaking out? Because I'm freaking out.
Exactly. So I'm just taking breaths because this is an intense part of the story. We're into the next morning. The midwife who had been attending my birth that whole night approached me and said, throughout the night, you were contracting and everything was looking beautiful, but you started to slow down. Your contractions have slowed down to a point where we need to kind of kick things into gear. And I'm thinking to myself, are you about to say Pitocin? Because
Right.
I hope not. So she does her whole thing. She's saying what she's saying. And sure enough, she said, it's time to try Pitocin. It's just going to be a whiff. We just do a little bit just to kick things into gear. And something she said that I find really interesting that I still haven't really cleared up yet is that she mentioned the doctor, because this particular hospital, you're probably familiar with it, has an OB side of things and a midwife side of things. And I very specifically chose the midwife side of things, which is separate from the OBs.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that an OB was being mentioned at my birth, that he also thinks that I need to be given Pitocin, that he's been sort of monitoring what's going on. And so I just thought, well, I didn't go to him.
Right.
I don't know why he's making the decisions. And I told you all very specifically for the last 9 months that I did not want Pitocin. Could we just go for the C-section? And it was even acknowledged by the midwife that I had advocated against Pitocin my whole pregnancy. Something along the lines of, we know you've been saying no Pitocin. Truly acknowledged that was my wishes. But she thought she was doing me a favor by saying, we don't want to go right for the C-section. We want to give you a fair shot at a VBAC. So talk it over with your husband and let us know. Right? The whole talk it over, walk away. And what are we going to say? No other options or ideas were presented to us in that situation of maybe we can try this, maybe we could try that. Maybe we can turn the epidural down, and I'm not thinking of these options at the moment because I'm laboring and
Right.
I'm also, I have an epidural, it kind of slows you down a little bit. So in a desperate attempt to just get it over and just meet our son and we're exhausted, we agreed. We said, sure. We didn't even say yes. We basically just said, fine. We were fine. So they give me Pitocin and I'm still only 3 centimeters dilated.
Oh,
the magic number for me.
Yeah, these 3s keep coming back for you.
I know. So I'm 3 centimeters dilated and we're going to start you on Pitocin. And I just have the worst feeling. I'm just oh my God. Okay. Okay. A few hours later, there's a new midwife on call. And she is another one I am not familiar with. I had seen her maybe once, maybe twice, nothing more than that. So after they give me Pitocin, they're checking me for dilation. And they're wow, you're at 5 centimeters, 6 centimeters, 7 centimeters. And I get up to like 9.5 centimeters. And I'm like thinking like, oh my gosh, it's actually working. Like the Pitocin's actually working. Like, okay, never mind then. And I don't know at what point or why this other doctor came in with the new midwife, but the two of them approached our bedside. And I'm thinking, I'm riding this high of like, I'm 9 centimeters dilated, like thinking this guy's here to clear me for pushing, right? Like, I don't know
Right.
why. I don't know why he's there. Maybe he's going to deliver the baby. Maybe he's got to be the one to say to the midwives, okay, you can deliver this baby. Like, I don't know what's going on. And so he's checking me. And then he starts humming and hawing. He's like, huh. And he says, I have to go get another doctor. I need to get another opinion. And he comes in with another doctor and she checks me and she starts humming and hawing. And I'm just thinking, what is going on? And the three of them, the midwife and the two doctors, they go and they have a little huddle in the corner of the room.
Not talking to you at all.
No, not yet, at least.
Ugh.
So then they come back and they start asking me questions like, have you ever had cervical surgery or any kind of injury or anything like that? And I'm like, nope. What's going on?
Yeah.
And they're like, huh. I'm like, what's going on? They go on to explain that they're feeling dilation. That's about 9.5, 10 centimeters. But off to the side, there is a little hole, and it feels like the size of like what a buttonhole would feel like. And we have no idea what it is. It's like almost like this like puncture hole or something. So that's why we're asking if you've ever had surgery or an injury or anything like that. And I'm just saying like, nope. So what now? And they're apologetic and they say, we're going to have to do a C-section because we don't know what we're feeling. And if you push this baby through, it could potentially be really bad. So I start crying my eyes out, basically like, I hate you. I hate you all. Like, why? We could have done this hours ago. I was so upset. I was so defeated. I just thought like, get this nightmare over with. Like, I can't believe these are my stories. Like, I can't believe it. So we go into the operating room and my son is born surgically and then he's not crying right away. And I'm just like, oh no. So they get him to start crying. And so I'm relieved thinking the whole thing's over. The nurses give my son to my husband, and my husband brings baby over to me so that I can see him and meet him and have the magical moment. That is supposed to happen. And in the same second that I am like basking in the glow of my son, just like, oh my gosh, look at this thing I created, I hear someone talking to me over me, above me, like on the other side of the table, like, wait, what's going on? And I look over, I'm like, are you talking to me? Like, what are you saying? It's the midwife.
Mm-hmm.
And she looks like she has some news to deliver. And I'm just like, oh my God. And she's just like, she doesn't really know how to start. So this is how she starts. She leads with this, which is so complex, let's just say. She goes, I hope you weren't planning on having more children.
What?
Yeah. And I knew kind of what she meant because I was just like, but I was like, huh? What? Huh? What?
Oh.
Yeah. I hope you weren't planning on having more children. So she leads with that, right?
Oh my God.
Just it's just questionable. It's just like, she must have just been like, maybe it was a first for her. I don't know. She goes on to explain that the dilation of 10 centimeters was not actually my cervix. It was a large uterine rupture. The buttonhole off to the side was my cervix. having
Oh,
not dilated past 3 centimeters.
oh my God.
Yeah. So I'm being told this information. You weren't dilating. It was a rupture. You're losing a lot of blood. You've already lost a lot of blood. We have to do a hysterectomy,
Oh,
like right now. Like, like it's kind of already happening because she didn't say this, but like you're gonna die. Like it was basically like it's happening now. It's that
yeah.
urgent, and it's that much of an emergency. And I can only describe the next minutes as like something out of a movie where I get hot because I start to like panic. I'm just like
Right.
I'm panicking at this point. So I get hot, like from like my head starts at my head and it kind of like coats my whole body. And I'm just like, oh no. And then I remember my eyes start to scan the room, like they're bopping back and forth. Like, I don't know if it was like my brain doing something where I was trying to process what was happening or what, but it was a very strange feeling of like my eyes were just going all over the place. Also, I was like kind of strapped down to the table, so I couldn't really move otherwise. So maybe I was just trying to like move,
Yeah.
but it was a very panicky feeling. What felt like a dozen more people came running into the room. The doctor who started to perform my hysterectomy, who needed to be called in from another part of the hospital, he doesn't even have anything to do with birth. He works on like little old ladies. So
Um,
he gets called in to do my hysterectomy. And at one point, he shouts out to everyone to calm down.
oh my God.
And I was too drugged up to cry, I think, at that point. But I was just like, oh my God, I'm dying. I'm dying. What is my daughter going to do without me? All of thoughts, right? And my eyes go from sort of ping ponging all around to like really drooping, getting heavy. I can feel myself drifting off. Like I was either they upped the drugs or it was blood loss or a combination of both, whatever it was. I was drifting away. And I remember being like shaking my head, just like shake it. Keep your eyes open, keep your eyes open. Because I thought that I was dying.
Yeah.
And that was a moment that stuck with me that I had to really heal from. So that's how I learned about my rupture. I did eventually pass out during the surgery. And then, obviously and thankfully, I woke up. I was in surgery for about 7 hours.
Oh my gosh.
I was intubated. I needed a blood transfusion. And then I was in post-op for about 2 hours. And so I didn't get to meet or hold, I should say. I did meet briefly, but I didn't get to hold my son until 9 hours after he was born, which really messes with me. That really, really messes with me. So yeah, the 9 hours that it messed with me emotionally and spiritually and all of the things, but I really think that I really think it messed with my son. Um,
Hmm.
'Cause he was a tough baby, and it felt to me like it had to do with the birth. So, but that's more postpartum. So I woke up and I woke up from this really vivid dream. I'll never forget it. It's like I still can't believe this and that like wasn't even a dream. Like what was this? But I remember like a really pink sky and I was on this mountaintop that felt very much like the Himalayas or like somewhere out east, like really rocky, really jagged, really elevated mountaintop. And there was a figure there. And as that figure became more clear, I realized it was the daughter to a neighbor of ours and who we're friendly with. And she was there studying abroad. She was in Tibet at the time. And so I was like, why her? Why this mountain? Why like a mountaintop? And then it almost felt like I touched the heavens a little bit. And like she was so close to it that like my spirit visited her and like anchored me
Mm.
back down to earth or something. Like that was my takeaway. It was just such a trippy thing that I had to try and make sense of it. And that's kind of the only way that I could like make sense of it. So
Yeah.
it got me to wake up. Like I woke up from that. I was like, is that Emma? And then I realized it was, and I was like, oh, and then I woke up and I started to look around. I see my husband over there. He's with the baby. He sees that I've woken up. So he gets really excited. He jumps up. He comes up next to me. He brings the baby to me and he starts to explain everything, like what went down. And I start talking and I'm like, oh, like, why does my throat hurt so bad? And he said that I was intubated and that's probably why, so I'm learning all of these things. And so I start to wake up a little bit more. Nurses are coming in, giving me like ice chips and chicken broth and just kind of like tenderly taking care of someone who went through something that's really out of the ordinary for them.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was in the hospital for a total of 7 days. We had to treat my son for jaundice. He had severe jaundice. And my postpartum experience at the hospital wasn't wonderful. Like they kept forgetting or like needed like every nurse change, there needed to be like that piece of information told. And so just like this constant reminder of like hysterectomy, hysterectomy, hysterectomy,
Mm.
hysterectomy. And I'm just like, I cannot believe what just happened to me.
Right.
Oh my God. And I probably cried every single day. Like what happened to me? Like it's just hitting me like a ton of bricks every single time. And I needed a catheter for 2 weeks also, which was really hard. I hated that. Hated it, hated it, hated it. I thought I was going to have it forever. So on the final day of being at the hospital and learning that we were going to be discharged and everything, I was super excited to be going home. And they needed to show me how to like tend to my catheter, keep it clean and how to empty and everything. And then I also had to take Lovenox as a medication, which is an injection. So they had to teach me how to like give myself injections, which I had to do for, I think, 10 days after getting home. I walked out a completely different person than walking in.
Yeah.
I was broken. Like I was so broken and beaten and battered and just I left at the same exact time as another mom and she was walking out. I was like, why did you make me leave with her?
Yeah. Oh.
Why did you do that to me? Like we were basically in the elevator together and I'm like in a wheelchair with a catheter, a huge donut because my insides are on my outside,
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's just like this glowing mom, like walking out of the
Ugh.
hospital. Oh, it was just I felt so bad. It was awful. And so then I got home and I thought the worst was behind me. And oh boy, was it not. It was ahead of me.
Oh no.
So postpartum was really bad. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't imagine your world was completely turned upside down in a matter of hours. So it feels like too simple a question to ask, but like what was that postpartum process like?
I didn't know what to expect. It was something that I was hoping I could just get past. I've been through some stuff. I don't come from the greatest upbringing. Family dynamics are really, really toxic. I've been through some stuff. I have never experienced a mental state quite like I was postpartum. I had never experienced a panic attack quite like I had experienced, or a flashback ever quite like that. The only thing that I can actually maybe say I've experienced flashbacks with was growing up right outside of New York City during 9/11. It was very much something that I like witnessed Even though I wasn't in the city, I see the skyline from my town. So that's the closest thing that I can think of, so it was like that level of catastrophe. For the first 2 weeks, I would say I was okay. I was like surprisingly okay. I was mostly just happy to be alive, I think. I was just really excited to be home. A lot of people were coming over and just wanting to hear what the heck happened. They wanted to help, they wanted to support me. No one showed up in a way that was selfish and in a way that was like, it was all very tender. Everyone was very tender around what happened to me. So I was distracted a lot for those first 2 weeks, and people were bringing food over, and, I just had company. And it was also a really great way for me to tell the story over and over and over again, which helped me sort of compartmentalize what happened, confirm what happened, and that it was really messed up.
Yeah.
And that just therapeutic process of storytelling. I don't know. It was just like every time I told it was just like it furthered that processing of it. And then after the 2 weeks, it's like it's you're in the thick of it anyway. Like that honeymoon kind of like the newborn honeymoon feeling kind of starts to fade off around 2 weeks, maybe. The sleep deprivation, the pain, it was just like at 2 weeks, it was not getting better. And it wasn't necessarily getting worse, but it was just like, oh my God, I'm still in it. And this is going to take a long time. Like it was hitting me about like just the length of time it was going to take to heal. So then I started to grieve and mourn because I was just like, wow, this is a lot. And then around 2 weeks postpartum, while nursing my son, I had my first flashback. And they were always prompted by nursing. That was my biggest trigger. And I wanted to nurse my baby so badly. I did it with my daughter. I had a wonderful time. I think that formula is a wonderful thing. I just knew that I was able to. It was just this other thing that was getting in my way, And then nursing just became such a trigger every single time I was having these flashbacks. And the first flashback I had was so intense that I guess I did it. Like I blacked out. I woke up, or I guess I came to in a different part of the house, and baby wasn't even latched onto me. He was like crying.
Oh my gosh.
And I like came to, and so I don't know if I was like wandering around in a panic. I don't know what was happening, but I was having a flashback to being on the operating table in the operating room, like with all of the people running around, the doctor yelling, calm down, thinking I was dying. Like it was that moment. Every single time I just came back, I was coming back to that moment. And so it was like blacking out in a sense of I wasn't in reality anymore. I was like in these moments. And so I would come to and I'd be like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, where am I? Like, what the hell? And then after one really bad one, I had my first panic attack. And that was just like, it was a quick onset of like, I don't know how to describe it other than just like, I have to die. Like, I'm either going to die or I have to die. Like, it's just the worst feeling. And that lasted for about 8 months, like the intense pieces, because I couldn't get into an EMDR therapist for that. That amount of time. I finally found someone. I got in, and 5 sessions of EMDR therapy got me out of the debilitating flashbacks and panic attacks. So I got pulled out of that. So I was one step further into the healing, or away from that, I should say. And then about 18 months total to feel like I could even tell the story in a way that I started to on social media. And then I was terrified, but I did it anyway. And I have received nothing but amazing, everything, connections and responses and just meeting people, hearing their stories, growing my following. So it's been quite a journey. It's a terrible club to be in.
Yeah.
And one that, had I not entered it, I wouldn't have met some of these amazing people that I've been able to meet. The experience shifted my outlook on life. It shifted my outlook on my business. And my massage practice is now geared entirely around the journey into motherhood, whether you've had a positive experience into it or not. Obviously, I connect with survivors.
Mm-hmm.
That's who I am eager to help. But I also want to celebrate with people who have had positive experiences too, because even birthing experiences that have good outcomes and weren't necessarily traumatic, we're still in America, and we're still in this system that just is not designed for us.
No.
And even people who, it almost is harder for people where like, this doesn't make sense. I'm privileged. I'm all of the things. And it's still so hard for me. Why is it so hard for me? And so I like to think of this experience as, I don't think that there necessarily has to be silver linings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that can be tricky to navigate. That could be a slippery slope to tell survivors.
Absolutely. It's that toxic positivity.
Absolutely. And so, not that there is necessarily a silver lining or that this is necessarily the silver lining, but the way I look at it is, if I am going to be, if this was my experience and to not heal from it feels pretty horrible, it would have probably killed me, honestly.
Yeah.
I almost died more than that one time, right?
Yeah.
If you know what
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
I had no choice. Like, I had to heal. I had to heal for the love that I have for my children. And I also just can't not sit back and not help others.
Yeah.
I can't.
And this is what drew me to you. And I initially was drawn to you before things got the worst for me. When I
Oh,
reached out to you the first time through social media, it was the very beginning of my mental health decline.
mm,
And just like you had said, like you thought you'd seen the worst and that it couldn't get worse. I had no idea how bad it was going to get. And your content and your mission struck such a chord with me, because even then I was like, this is not okay. There are not resources available for us, and I need to do something about it. And here's someone who is doing something about it. So that's kind of like a perfect segue. Like, do you think that experience was the birth of Strega Luna for you, or were you going by that before, or like was this was the new version of Victoria?
it has been a new version of Victoria. Absolutely. I am not the same person before. And even though this experience is very unique and specific to me and helping me in my business or like my mission, like there was always the desire to work with moms. And it's very, I'm curious about it. It's just like some kind of foreshadowing or foreseeing of like,
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I'm just drawn to moms. I thought it was because I wanted to be a mom, but maybe I just had a feeling that we are where there is such a broken system and vulnerability, and having this experience opened up the floodgates to all these other stories. And I'm just like, what is
Yeah.
happening? Oh my, like,
Exactly.
what is happening? Like, I thought it was an isolated incident. I just can't birth, like, and then nope, it's just like, oh my gosh. So I was sort of active on social media, and never thought in a million years that I'd be like on a public profile with a couple thousand followers. Like, I really never expected that. And then as I started to explore the vulnerability of sharing my story and growing a following and connecting with people, I started to I started to connect with it in this intense way of just like I I have to keep sharing. If this is resonating with this many people already, I got to keep talking. I just have to keep talking. And so the more I started to share my experience, the more I was connecting, and those connections are so healing. It
Yes.
is in community where we heal. And when you find a group of people who know exactly what you're going through, I did it for me as much and am doing it for me as much as I'm hoping to help other people because I'm blown away by some of y'all. Like,
Well, the exact same thing goes for Quiet Connection. I mean, I started it with the intent of connecting other birthing people because I felt so alone, but it has been just as healing and therapeutic for me. I mean, I shared my story in season 1, but doing the work and meeting people like you, meeting all of the parents that I've met heals me. It's not only is it like a distraction on the daily because it's hard work. I mean, you know, being a social media presence, you have a much larger following than I have. I'm brand new to this. But keeping up with a social media presence is a job in and of itself.
yeah,
So it's a good distraction in that sense, which helps me sort of stay away from the flashbacks and stay away from the panic attacks. But it also, as much as it's creating these connections for these families, it's creating a connection for me too. So it's like selflessness, I guess. Like,
yeah.
So I 100% can relate and understand. And I think that's another reason that I was so drawn to your Instagram. And like, I was just like, she gets it. Like, she gets it.
Yeah.
And what I love is that you are coming at it from this like holistic body work approach. And you're really helping these moms. It's not just a physical level. It's a whole body holistic experience. And I can say from experience, like, I've never, since the birth of my second, I haven't been as calm and at peace as I was when I was on your table. And I'm sort of coming at it from the I'm up on my soapbox for mental health. I'm like we need better mental health care in general, but especially for our moms and birthing people.
Yeah.
And we need better advocacy in the birthing process.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been so nice because it feels like they just sort of fit together so nicely.
Totally.
Yeah. I feel so privileged to have met you and now to have heard your story. And while I did have medical trauma, you definitely went through a more traumatic experience in the moment. Mine was a little different, but knowing even that we're not alone in that trauma is just, it's like you said earlier, it's a club that you don't want to be in. But when you're in it, just knowing that there's someone else gives you a little bit of peace.
And it's the best people too. It's like, why does it always happen to the best people?
Like, what the fuck?
What the fuck?
It's like, and so I don't know about you or where you're at in the process. I am still very deep in the recovery, and I'm very much in I'm still in the anger phase of my grieving process.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly like, what the fuck did I do? What did I do to deserve this? We didn't do anything. We didn't do anything.
We didn't fail. We were failed, you know?
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I've had to sort of accept, and you mentioned this very early on, was that there doesn't have to be a reason.
Mm-hmm.
It just happens.
Mm-hmm.
It just happens. And I'm still grappling with that because I think it's bullshit. But
Yeah. And it didn't
it
have to be.
happened.
Yeah. And it didn't have to, but it still did anyway. And to us,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
then you see people who have some of the easiest and best births. It's like,
Do you still find, I don't want to say still because I don't know what your experience was, but do you find it challenging to do you feel like you have to separate yourself when celebrating friends and family that have an easy time with their births?
I have such a hard time with that. I struggle. My sister-in-law had 2 births recently that went well, I politely requested to be left off of the text chain. So everyone respected that. And I was left off of like the updates. And I just sort of hold space for myself. But I get really sad. I do. I'm happy for them.
Yeah.
And I'm really sad for me because we get this chance in life to do this extraordinary, sacred thing. And it doesn't come without risks, right? But when you see it happen so well and like feels like it's the way it's supposed to happen, and then you just know you hold on to this experience and that's your story, it's like something doesn't add up. And
Yeah.
as humans, I think we just try to make sense of everything. Like that's what our brains are trying to do. We're just trying to make sense of it. And I can't. And so that's where it's hard because it's just this lingering unanswered question that I will always wonder why.
Yeah.
Why me and why not them or the other way around? And I would never wish bad outcomes on anybody. I just want dignified outcomes for everybody. That's what I
Yes.
want. It's like, I don't wish my experience on anyone else because if I experience this, everyone else has to. I just wish that I had a more dignified birthing experience. And that for me might have been like a scheduled C-section. That for me could have been the midwife actually saying, we won't try Pitocin, we'll do a C-section. It's just, it doesn't make you feel good about like yourself and your body. It just makes you feel
Yeah.
like you failed. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
hard to grapple with for sure. But I'm pretty comfortable with expressing my boundaries in a way that's like, I might not be able to be part of the text chain, or I might not be able to come to the hospital and visit, but yeah, it is what it is.
But it's good that you can advocate for yourself and that you do have those boundaries, and sounds like they're being met with respect, which is good.
Yes.
Because this giving birth changes you regardless of what your experience looks like. But when a traumatic birth changes you in ways that you can't prepare for.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it just feels so counterintuitive. Yeah.
Yeah. What's supposed to be the happiest moments of your life are tainted with some of the scariest and just most utterly terrifying
Oh, so scary.
moments of your life.
So terrifying. Yeah. It ain't right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you are in a better place now in terms of like your mental health? You feel like you got a better hold of your feelings on the whole thing?
Yeah, it's surprising sometimes. I'm like, wow. I don't know how it happened, but I also do, like I worked really hard to heal.
Mm-hmm.
It all started with those 5 EMDR sessions and then weekly therapy. I have gotten a lot more comfortable with like stirring the pot and rocking the boat. I feel like maybe being a little bit of a people pleaser got me into that situation in the first place. Again, I feel like I don't want to harbor responsibility. So I don't want that narrative to like sink in too much because that could be like
Yeah.
more of like victim blaming. But I feel as though there was people pleasing at play, and that has changed me for the better. I'm much more comfortable rocking the boat and stirring the pot, like I said. And that has helped my marriage actually get stronger because it really affected my marriage too. Like we were not okay. And instead of pretending like I was okay, I really just was in my healing. And it's funny enough because social media, right? Like how powerful can Instagram be? But it was
Yeah.
in connecting with these other accounts and stories that was like, oh, healing's really messy. Okay, I have permission to be really messy during this process. And so I did. I just said, okay, I give myself permission to be really messy and raw. And really embrace being unapologetic about finding joy, because in the same idea of healing is messy, there's also this, it's like give yourself permission to find joy. Like joy is going to be what is basically the opposite of a trigger. So I don't know if you've heard of glimmers, but it's like
Yes.
the opposite of a trigger.
Yes.
And I started to learn about that. So I'm like, oh, what's all this about? And what does that mean for me? Because it means different things for different people. And so I started to really come to understand that like healing is going to happen in joy. And I have to get really unapologetic about the things that are going to bring me joy, because it's going to involve things like something as mundane as like I have to go for a drive for an hour by myself, and like you have to sort of advocate for that, especially with little kids, to like, I'm going to put maple syrup in my coffee every single morning now. I don't
Mm.
care if it's $20 a week or like $20 every 2 weeks. I'm going to put maple syrup in my coffee because that's bringing me joy. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like these little tiny joyous experiences that sort of started to come together for me as bringing me to a path of healing. Like it was painting. Can describe it as like a puzzle. Like all of these little pieces were coming together and starting to paint a bigger picture for me of what a healed life or a healing life is going to look like for me. Luckily, my partner has shifted his ways into, because he was impacted, our marriage
Mm-hmm.
was impacted. Has shifted into acceptance of me being very unapologetic, which probably wasn't easy for him. I can see situations where maybe that would end a marriage. I was almost willing to let it because I knew I needed to heal, and that was
Yeah.
how I was going to. And so over time, in these little, I say a lot on this on social media too, but like healing can happen in the mundane. Like magic lives in the mundane. And so how can I create magical mundane moments, or how can I see these mundane moments and have more of a magical perspective on them? Because you're sort of stuck in, when you're healing postpartum, you're housebound. You can't really go out and
Mm-hmm.
about. And so it's very mundane feeling. It's very isolating. And so things like putting maple syrup in my coffee were the things that were going to spark joy. And
Yeah.
that started to build up. And the more I practiced that, the more unapologetic I became in that self advocacy of like, this is going to bring me joy, which is going to help me heal, which is going to help me get past what happened and living a fuller life.
Something that I ask every guest that I have on the show is kind of a complex question, and I'm always surprised by the answers because they're so different. But I'm going to ask you, if you could go back in time before either of your children were born, and not necessarily, you can't tell yourself what's going to happen, you can't give yourself any sort of preparation, but you can tell yourself something that will get you through, what would you tell yourself?
I love that question. I would tell myself, it's like more of an essence of something like fight, like the essence
Yeah.
of like put on some armor and get ready for battle.
Yeah.
Because I had a feeling, even though I said in the beginning, like, oh, I assumed it was going to be great. I had a feeling, probably because of the hospital system, because I just don't have full trust in that,
Mm-hmm.
that something was not to this extent, but that something was going to feel inconvenient or just feel like I am in the system and I can't fully advocate for myself. I was nervous about that. And if I could go back, I would say to myself, like, your feelings and your instincts are correct and you have to fight. Get ready to just fight for this.
Mm.
So I think I would bring in a little sense of that anger, like I think
Mm-hmm.
I would try and get her angry. Like you said, like not tell her what happened, but just be like,
Yeah.
you're going to have to bring in you're going to have to sharpen that edge a little bit. Like I think that's
Yeah.
where I would go with it.
Prepare yourself for battle.
Mhm.
And you got through it, and you're still getting through it. And for a lot of our listeners, that's going to be a little glimmer of hope for them. It's a glimmer of hope for me, that's for sure. And yeah, so before we wrap up, I just kind of want to plug. I'm going to tag you in our show notes and everything, tag your socials, but is it Strega Luna postpartum or is it just Strega Luna?
It's Strega Luna postpartum.
Okay. And you're on Instagram. Do you also have a Facebook account?
I have a Facebook account. That's where you will find me as Strega Luna Farm. I'm sort
Okay.
of two entities that will eventually merge into one. I've got a big vision and plan set for my property here. So I'll just say that.
Okay. I know. I think I've heard little snippets and I think it's beautiful what you have planned.
Yes, it's going to be great. So yeah,
Yes.
Strega Luna postpartum on Instagram, Strega Luna Farm on Facebook.
Yes. And so I would highly encourage our listeners to check out those accounts. And if you are in Vermont, I don't care where in Vermont you are, make an appointment with Victoria, make the drive because you will be cared for, you will be embraced, you will be supported. And it was I think an important piece in my healing journey. So I appreciate you and what you're doing.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me.
Well, thank you again for sharing your story. And we'll see where this journey takes us.
It'll be a forever journey, that's for sure. But I'm glad that I have folks like you and the community at my side.
Thank you to Victoria for being so honest and brave in sharing her story. I'm incredibly inspired by her holistic approach to healing women through her postpartum bodywork. Be sure to check out her social media accounts at Strega Luna Postpartum on Instagram and Strega Luna Farms on Facebook. If you want to follow along with us on Quiet Connection, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at Quiet Connection or at Quiet Connection Podcast. Remember to show your support for our community by leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform, and consider sharing our episodes through your social media. You can also consider becoming a Patreon member and gain access to things like bonus content, ad-free listening, and goodies in the mail once a month. If you'd like to share your story, you can reach us through our website at quietconnectionpodcast.com or by email at quietconnectionppmh@gmail.com. Join us next time where another story is told and you realize you are not alone. I see you.